I have learned that Heavenly Father's plan for us is fabulous. That what we do in this life really matters. And that the Savior's atonement is what makes our Father's plan possible.
Hello and welcome again to another episode of Thinking Celestial, a Follow the Prophet podcast, where we review General Conference talks, and it is unbelievably episode 200. It's 25,000 downloads, which isn't a lot for 200 episodes, but it is a fantastic experience to have reviewed 200 General Conference talks, from classics to most recents, and I am humbled by how much fun this has been, and I have been taught so much, and the Spirit has just taught me more than I have words to say. Today we're going to review a classic that's also a new talk, and with me to commemorate the 200th episode is Brother Brad Wilcox, Dr. Brad Wilcox.
Yeah, Brother Brad Wilcox, who is about 200 years old, so
False.
I might as well do this episode.
I love it. I love it. And I don't, if it's okay, I call you Brad.
Oh, sure.
You can call me Kirk.
Kirk, I'm just so grateful for what you're doing. I love the focus of the podcast because having the chance, my wife listens to conference talks every morning while she's putting on her makeup. And so I also hear them while I'm getting ready. And it's just so uplifting to review the words that have come to us from prophets, seers, revelators, and the sisters who help lead this church. It's just remarkable.
I love it. And I love the focus and what it grants me as far as a vision to see General Conference laid out in the way it does. And then the most valuable part of this whole experience has been the impact and insights of different people, from students who are fresh off a mission or just about to go on a mission to here.
You can certainly see how people are responding to the talks, and not just what the leaders of the church are saying to them, but also what the Spirit's saying to them and what they're getting from it to say back or to say to others. I mean, it's wonderful. I love the curriculum of the church right now, where we're actually teaching regularly out of conference talks, because it does give everybody in the church to have the kind of experience you're offering listeners here.
One of the coolest things I think about conference talks that this one, we should probably introduce that part. We're going to review And Now I See by Jeffrey R. Holland. And I miss him already.
Yeah. This was his final conference talk.
It was.
And I'm just so grateful to be able to, in some small way, keep this message alive for him.
Well, you have a personal connection to Jeffrey R. Holland as well.
I was very blessed to be able to serve with him when he was in Chile. In 2002 to 2004, he was sent down by President Gordon B. Hinckley to kind of just deal with a few issues that came with
clean up on aisle 3.
Yeah. But it was just rapid growth. I
Sure.
mean, when the same thing happened with President Oaks, who was sent to the Philippines, because you have these countries where the church is growing very, very quickly, and they were able to deal with some of the issues that brought about and try to bring things back into a positive, forward-moving momentum. And they both did a beautiful job in their different countries. And I have seen the way the work has progressed in Africa, where there's also rapid growth. I've seen it progress so differently than it progressed for a time in Chile. And I think a lot of that is because we've seen the leadership of Elder Holland and President Oaks, who are now dealing with worldwide growth with the lessons that they learned as apostles who oversaw the work in rapidly growing countries. So it was wonderful because Debbie and I served as mission leaders in the Santiago East Mission, which is where Elder Holland and his wife lived. And we were able to be there and at the same time watch the way he was able to so masterfully not just administer, but to minister,
Yeah.
and the changes he made, the hard decisions he made, the way he did it with so much love and compassion, that instead of turning people away, he was able to strengthen them and help them keep staying strong.
I don't think people who want to criticize the church understand really what goes into a personal ministry. People can say lots of things on social media about everybody.
Oh, and they do.
And it's awkward and uncomfortable, but I don't think everyone sees the personal ministry that somebody like President Holland had to experience and go through to make those changes, which would explain a lot of things to them if they knew. So
Yeah.
I love that you had that experience.
Yeah.
Is there anything you could share about that experience that would would be
I
appropriate for our moment here?
I remember writing in my journal. I was sitting on the stand, and I was translating for Sister Holland by leaning forward from the bench behind her and just kind of whispering in her ears what was going on as people were speaking. Elder Holland knew enough Spanish that he could understand what was going on in a meeting, and he could bear a beautiful and powerful testimony in Spanish, but he didn't know enough that he could speak in Spanish. And so Elder Holland would often speak in English, and then it would be translated. But I remember listening to him, and as I was translating for his wife, and then writing later in my journal, I would follow this couple to the end of the earth. Just watching them lead in such a Christ-like way and teach in such a Christ-like way and love people. He was so demonstrative in his and willing to hug. And in Chile, that is the language of love, is hugging and kissing people on the cheeks. And he was so willing to demonstrate his love for men, for women, for children, for youth. He just reached out in love. And it was great to be able to watch that. His wife was so tender with my missionaries. Their ward was in our mission. Their condominium that they lived in was in my mission. And so she would have my missionaries over to her house every P-Day for lunch. And she would do their laundry for them.
Oh my goodness.
And they just enjoyed conversations with her, and she cared for them so lovingly. Whenever Elder Holland would go to the church office building that was there at the time. It's no longer an area office building, but he would go there, and our mission office was in the basement, and he would always come down. There were 2 mission offices there in the basement, and he would come down and he would greet the missionaries and thank them for their service. And it meant so much to these missionaries to know that he wasn't just up on the top floor taking care of the area. He was coming down to the basement and caring individually for the missionaries. They cared for my children. He had a tough assignment when he was first made a member of the 70 because he was sent to England. And that meant that his young children, who were still not out of school, were going with them to England and having to uproot themselves and move in their young years.
Right.
And so he remembered that. Sister Holland remembered that. And they were so sweet to my children. We had 2 who were older, and one was serving a mission with us and then came back to BYU, and then the other was at BYU, Idaho, and then left on his mission to Spain. And so those 2 older ones had some interactions with him. In fact, my son was blessed to have him set him apart as a missionary because he had come down to visit us.
What a cool experience.
And then he said, who's supposed to set me apart? Because I'm not supposed to go to the MTC without being set apart. And I said, well, we could just have the stake president do it. And he says, I won't understand a word he says because he speaks Spanish and I don't speak Spanish yet. And so when I called Elder Holland to ask him, should I send him, how should we handle this?
Do it? Should you do
Elder
it?
Holland said, I'll set him apart for his mission. And he had the chance to be set apart by Elder Holland, which was so tender, so sweet. But Sister Holland and Elder Holland both took my little young ones who were just 5th grade going on 6th grade, 6th grade going on 7th grade. Difficult times going into those middle school years.
Especially away from home.
And away from home and learning Spanish and culture shock. And it was just really hard having left their friends. And boy, they were just so sweet to take those 2 kids under their wings and to care about them, to remember them by name, to call and check up on them, to laugh with them. In fact, I have to tell you this.
Do it.
This was so fascinating because my daughter came home from school. They went to an international school which was taught in English, and then they had a Spanish class.
Right.
But in English, my daughter came home and said, "Dad, you'll never believe it. Elder Holland's in my math book." I said, "What?" She said, "Elder Holland is in my math book." I said, "What are you talking about?" So she opened up to one of the pages, and there one of the story problems said, "Yesterday it took Jeff Holland 1 hour to get to work. This morning, Jeff Holland drove to the train station in 20 minutes, waited for the train for 7 minutes, rode the train for 12 minutes, and then walked for 15 minutes to get to work. How long did it take Jeff Holland to get to work this morning?" I mean, I was laughing so hard.
You took a picture of it even.
So I took a picture of it, and I put a little sticky note on it, and I said, "Elder Holland, could you please help Whitney with her homework?" And I sent it to him because I just knew that he would get a laugh out of it.
He would
enjoy
that.
Well, he didn't just laugh about it. He actually sent her a handwritten note back. And it said, "Dear Whitney, I was pleased you discovered my day job. I regularly submit math problems for textbooks, and sometimes I don't know whose name to use. I think I'll use yours next. If Whitney Wilcox has 5 boyfriends in Provo and gains 1 a day for 14 days in Chile, how many of them will be baptized, go on missions, and want to marry her?"
Oh, my goodness.
And then he wrote, "Thanks for being here. I'm immensely proud of you." And that little note has become a family treasure, not only because it shows Elder Holland's incredible sense of humor, but it shows how tenderly he cared for a little girl who was going into middle school and struggling to adjust to her new life. But he remembered how hard it was for his kids.
Yeah.
And so he and his wife were really sweet with our kids. And I'll just never forget being able to have a front row seat and watch how he solved problems, watched how he received revelation, watched how he dealt with very difficult issues, and watched how he ministered in such a Christ-like way. And I saw miracles under his hands.
Of course.
He never would do blessings because people would often request them, and he would turn them to their local stake president or bishop or a leader. Yeah. But one time, he was coming to a stake conference in our mission, and he said his secretary's father was struggling with cancer. And so she had asked if he would give him a blessing. And so he said, "Yeah, let's do it right after the stake conference." He said, "I'll just meet him afterwards and give him the blessing." Well, the word got out that this was happening. And so then everybody wanted a blessing. And dear Elder Holland said, "I can't say yes to one and no to others." So he said, "Just gather them in the Relief Society room and we'll do the blessings." And so he would put his hands on the person's head, and this was person after person after person. And then I would put my hands on his hands, and then as he would give the blessing in English, I would translate it into Spanish.
My goodness.
There was a young boy there, teenage boy, who had requested a blessing. He was a brand new convert, and he was going to go into the hospital to have a surgery on his heart where they replace a faulty valve. Well, what do they use? Is it a pig valve, a cow valve?
I'm not a medical student.
Anyway, it's an animal.
I think it's a pig valve.
A pig valve, I think, that they put into the heart. Well, that's what he was going to have happen, and so he had asked for a blessing. And as Elder Holland was giving the blessing, I mean, this is this is a really tender, sacred experience for me. As he was giving the blessing, he said, I bless you that you will not need this surgery, that your heart will be healed right now.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, I did, for about 2 seconds, I thought, I better soften this. You know, as I translate it, I better soften this language. And then in the same moment, I'm thinking, Brad, what the heck are you thinking?
Exactly what I would think.
You can't soften an apostle's language. And so I said exactly what he had said. And there was this gasp around the room. I mean, he'd given beautiful blessings to lots of people.
That kind of proclamation.
But everybody knew that this was different. And when we finished, he says to this boy, he says, you just had a very special blessing. And the boy, I'm translating all this.
Right.
The boy said, I know. And he said, how long have you been in the church? And the boy said, well, I joined a few weeks ago. And he was there with the missionaries who had baptized him. Mm-hmm. And he said, did any members of your family join? And he said, no, but my mom's here with me. And so then we had this lady stand up, and I'm translating for him. Mm-hmm. And he says, you have a remarkable son. And he's received a beautiful blessing from the Lord. He said, why aren't you in the church with him?
Oh, my goodness.
And I am translating this. And she says, I smoke. And so I said to Elder Holland, yo fumo. Yeah. And he said, stop it. Just like that.
Oh, my goodness.
Like
he commanded
strong. Stop it. And then he puddled up and started to cry. And he said, you are letting those stupid cigarettes stand in the way of being in this church with your son? He said, stop it. He said, you stop it, and I will come to your baptism. Well, man, the missionaries looked at her like, lady, you are stopping. You are stopping. We're going to live at your home, and we're going to make sure you don't smoke anymore because we want Elder Holland to come to your baptism.
I'm sure you checked up on them, too.
Oh, and they checked up on this woman, and they were helping her, and she did finally quit smoking. And then the missionaries called me and said, tell Elder Holland because he promised to come to her baptism. And I said, oh, elders, I said, he's so busy. I said, you just can't even imagine how busy he is. Let's just let him off the hook. They said, no, he promised. And so I called Elder Holland and I said, Elder Holland, do you remember this experience? And he said, oh, yeah. He said, I remember it very well. He said, you taught me how to say stop it in Spanish. Deténgase. Because I translated it.
Oh, my goodness.
And
with the same force.
With the same force. Oh. And he said, I'd love to come, but he said, I'm going to be in southern Chile. I said, would you like us to postpone the baptism? And he said, no, never. I'd never want you to postpone a baptism. He said, let me write her a letter and get her some flowers, and will you please represent me at the baptism? Well, I knew there'd be a lot of disappointed people, but he wrote a beautiful letter, and he had gotten some beautiful flowers, and I picked them up from his office, and then I went to the baptismal service, and the missionaries were disappointed.
I'm sure they were.
But I was kind of glad that he wasn't there, because sometimes baptismal meetings in Chile can get a little out of hand because they got lots of little kids and they're all running all over the place. And it used to drive him a little crazy when the kids would be so irreverent and run up.
Bishop, I called it a rodeo.
Yeah.
Baptisms are always rodeos.
Yeah.
And they're that way in America,
and the kids
too.
would run up at the front and everything. And,
Sure.
And so I was kind of glad he didn't go. But when I stood to say to the sister, I said, Elder Holland's in the south of Chile, and he sends his love. He gave me this letter to give you. Mm-hmm. He gave me these flowers to give you. And he said he's so sorry that he can't come. Mm-hmm. And then she says to me, Presidente Wilcox, yo no me bautizo por el Elder Holland. She said, I'm not getting baptized for Elder Holland. she said, "Me bautizo por el Señor." I'm getting baptized for the Lord. Oh, and I thought, lady, you're going to make it. You're going to be just fine. Well, what happened to this boy? He ended up going into the hospital. They opened up his chest, and he didn't need the new valve.
My goodness.
They looked at the CAT scan, or I don't know, is it a CAT scan?
X-ray, whatever, probably
the X-ray,
something.
the CAT scan, whatever it
imaging.
is, the imaging.
There you go.
They looked at it, and the valve was faulty. They looked at his heart,
And it wasn't. Wow.
And so they sewed him up and sent him on his way. And when I reported that to Elder Holland, he just cried. And then when he would run into this boy at the stake conference, or if the boy was with the missionaries at the mission office, or when he would run into him, he would say, "My miracle boy, my miracle boy." And then he'd undo his shirt for about 3 buttons so that he could see his scar. And then he'd touch his chest and he would say, "My miracle boy, my miracle boy." I mean, it's pretty amazing to me that I have seen miracles at the hand of apostles that are as dramatic as anything we read about in the New Testament or in 3rd Nephi. And that was one of them.
And yet we're still surprised. Like I'm so refreshed that when you heard those words come out of Elder Holland's mouth, that you were like, wait a minute. I felt those same things. When in blessing situations, when words occur that I should say, part of my heart or maybe my senses say, are you sure? And what it is a building of faith. And I love that faith is a muscle that you have to exercise, sometimes in the face of opposition.
Yes.
What a great, thank you for sharing those experiences.
I don't know. I don't say these things to brag that I knew Elder Holland. I say these things as a witness of someone who can testify that he was indeed an apostle and that he lived a very Christ-like life. Right. And I'm so grateful for him and for his wonderful example for me, for my family. Elder Holland, the son, Elder Matt Holland, just spoke at BYU at a beautiful devotional. And he talked about the Book of Mormon, which is what Elder Holland talked about.
I was going to say that.
But, he said in his talk, after he talked about cling to the Book of Mormon during your wilderness times. That was the point of his talk. And then he talked about the passing of his parents, their love for the Book of Mormon. And then he talked about how he was making it through really well until the day when he realized he needed to delete his father's phone number from his phone.
Oh, boy.
And he said, I realized that I just wasn't going to hear that cheery voice. I just wasn't going to hear that loving voice. I wasn't going to be able to call him again in this life. And he said that just really made his absence very real to me. And as Elder Matt Holland was saying this to a packed Marriott Center, I was sitting there realizing, oh my gosh.
It's true.
I'm going to have to delete him from my phone too. And I just haven't had the courage to do it yet because I loved him deeply.
Which makes this conference talk so very meaningful. Very meaningful. Because he just literally lays out evidences. This is how I know. It's essentially his testimony of how I, quote unquote, see truths. And I think it's a beautiful way to look at it. And what a beautiful introduction to this concept.
Well, and he says, Jesus heals a blind man by spitting in the mud. And that's not sanitary.
No.
Spitting in the mud and then rubbing the mud on the blind man's eyes. What a weird miracle. And how often have we heard people talk about the Book of Mormon and the coming forth of the Book of Mormon as weird?
Yeah.
Oh, angels, seer stones. Oh, yeah.
Weird.
Weird. Words appeared on the stones. He put the stone in a hat. They make it sound so weird. Well, we can make spitting in mud and rubbing it on somebody's eyes weird too.
Yeah.
But the point that Elder Holland makes is that the blind man could see. And that was the evidence. Call it weird if you want to, but that was the evidence. And he says, my life is the evidence of the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon.
Oh, it's so much easier to try to convict the process, and it's so much harder to handle the product. You can say Joseph was weird, you can say the stones was weird. Those are all strange processes that we're not accustomed to. But what is the product of his moment? What is that experience? That Book of Mormon is really beautiful. And in so many ways that as we continue to read it, it just explodes itself in my mind.
I know a lot of people who say that they just cringe when they have to tell people how the Book of Mormon came forth. They wish for a more academic story. They wish for a story that nobody could write a Broadway musical about.
Right.
They wish for a story that wouldn't invite such criticism and such raised eyebrows.
Right.
But I know a story that's very academic. And that's the coming forth of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I mean, how did that happen? Well, it was in the 40s. Israel had just become a country. Some kid was chasing after a lost sheep, thought it might have gone into a cave by the Dead Sea, threw a rock in, and instead of scaring out a sheep, he broke a clay jar.
Crash, yeah.
So he goes to investigate, finds these clay jars that had scrolls inside of them.
Lots of them.
Yeah. And preserved because of the salt content in the soil, because we're on the lowest place on earth. I mean, and so people call this one of the greatest archaeological finds in history. And then the struggling university in Israel can't muster the funds or the capability to be able to preserve these scrolls, to translate the scrolls. They actually turned to professors at BYU, among others. Right at BYU, there are professors who still teach on that campus who were part of the process of preserving the scrolls, translating the scrolls, digitizing the scrolls. And now people can go to a museum in Jerusalem and see the Dead Sea Scrolls. Well, people want that kind of a story for the Book of Mormon. Let's just say Joseph Smith was plowing a field, hit something hard, dug it down a little bit, found these golden plates, took them to New York. Some scholars translated them. And now scholars at other universities have verified that the translation is correct. And now you can go to Salt Lake and there's a museum and you can look at the plates. As much as people wish for that kind of a story, I don't. Has one life been changed by the Dead Sea Scrolls? Has one person stopped smoking because of the Dead Sea Scrolls? Has one person made covenants in baptism because of the Dead Sea Scrolls? Has one person decided to save a marriage because of the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Any miracle boys?
Are there any miracle boys because of the Dead Sea Scrolls? But we can point to millions of people who have changed their lives because of the Book of Mormon. And so we don't apologize for how it came forth, because it's the miraculous way it came forth that pushes people's backs up against the wall. People can say, well, the Dead Sea Scrolls could have been written, could have been found, and could have been translated without God's hand. involved at all. But you can't say that about the Book of Mormon. You can't, because you have to. This story invites you to have faith because it pushes you into a position where you have to acknowledge that it couldn't have happened without God's involvement.
Absolutely.
And the minute you take that leap of faith and you say the book had to have had God's hand in it, then you are opening yourself to the faith that says, maybe God can have a hand in my life. And the minute you show that kind of faith, you're using your agency to invite God and Christ into your life, and they come. And so as sure as Elder Holland testified, our lives become the living proof that the book, the content of the book, and the way it came forth is of God.
Wow. You just touched on the two things that I think just sparked in my mind. The first is when President Holland says, the instrument of truth that brought my healing from the Lord came as pages in a book. Yes, the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ. And later on he says, it was translated by the gift and power of God. That's it. That's all. I think that means we have to choose to believe. And that's what this miraculous coming forth of the Book of Mormon requires us to do.
And if you stop choosing to criticize, if you stop choosing to condemn, they say that the Book of Mormon is the only book in the world that is hated by so many who have never even opened it.
That's true.
But if we choose to stop criticizing and suspend our disbelief and our cynicism just long enough to take that leap of faith, then we're going to find out that God's hand was in it, and that his hand can be in our lives.
So much of seeing is choosing to see, is choosing to recognize, is choosing to wash the clay off, is choosing to allow that experience to be a part of who we are in our testimony. As we wrap up part one of this milestone episode 200, I am grateful for Brad Wilcox's thoughtful insights into Elder Jeffrey R. Holland's powerful message, And Now I See. Today's conversation reminds us that discipleship often involves learning, unlearning, and patiently allowing the Lord to refine our spiritual vision. But we're only getting started. In part 2, we will continue this discussion and dive even deeper into how grace, growth, and a clearer spiritual sight shape our walk with Christ. You will not want to miss it. Join me and Brad next time for part 2 of episode 200 of Thinking Celestial, a Follow the Prophet podcast. The Thinking Celestial, Follow the Prophet podcast series has been produced by students and faculty at the SLCC Redwood Campus Institute. To listen to other episodes in this series or to enroll in the Institute class associated with these podcasts, see our website at myinstitute.churchofjesuschrist.org and click on the Taylorsville UT Redwood page. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. This recording is not an official publication of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The views expressed are those of the participants and are neither the official doctrine nor the Church's official teachings.